G'day, Professor Joseph Drew here. What an excellent start to the year. I've had so far 5 A-rank papers accepted in journals. I've got another one about to be accepted, and consequently I've got behind in doing these videos to explain each paper. This one is particularly interesting. I'm on a bit of a myth-busting exercise at the moment, and it will give you some really surprising results, explainable but surprising nevertheless, about the association between financial sustainability and population size. It's not what you think. As I said, I'm all about myth busting at the moment. I've got a long list in my diary, and if I last long enough, I'll hopefully go through that list. There's lots of things that people believe as absolute certainties, despite the fact that they've never been tested against economic theory, and they've never been robustly tested in an empirical manner using sophisticated techniques. And what I'm finding more and more with all these myth-busting papers that I'm doing and getting accepted is that what people commonly assume to be an undeniable fact is commonly wrong, completely wrong. This paper has just been published at AJPA, Australia's best public administration journal, with my good colleague Masato Miyazaki, professor at Saitama University in Japan, and my former student, Dr. Dana McQueston. Of course, there's no substitution for reading the whole paper, but most people are unlikely to do that, unfortunately, particularly our decision makers. It would be good if they did start reading scholarly literature. They wouldn't make the disastrous public policy interventions that they keep doing over and over again. But never mind, I'll go through the video, and if you're motivated, you can then get the paper and read it in full. So first of all, we go through neoclassical economic theory to explain that there's two sides of the size coin when it comes to financial sustainability. People just focus on what happens as you get bigger. They never look at the other side of the coin. Typical people, they want a particular answer. They only look for things that support that particular answer. So on the left-hand side there, you can see all the things, the arguments for bigger is better. You get economies of scale, maybe, but all the evidence suggests that they're not there. When they are, they're for particular functions, only a few functions, and occur at very low levels of scale. Greater organizational capacity, you've got more people, you can do more things, yes, but you pay them more too. More transparent reporting. It does seem to be the case that bigger councils have longer annual reports, sometimes longer financial statements too. There's some really interesting research in that. I don't know if there's any more information value, but they tend to be longer and prettier, and like, frankly, who actually reads these reports? And they will have greater revenue. Well, of course they will, but everyone forgets they'll also have greater expenditure. So on the negative side, or the side supporting or not supporting larger councils, supporting smaller councils, you do have economies of scale, but there's things called diseconomies of scale that everyone forgets about because it's not convenient. So a lot of big councils in Australia are operating with really quite material diseconomies of scale. Yes, you can have greater organisational capacity, but you tend to have lower productivity for two reasons. First of all, in a bigger organisation, if you've ever worked in big organisations and small ones like I have, you know in bigger organisations, people fly under the radar. They don't get noticed, and people aren't riding them when their work performance drops. I'm not saying it happens in all large councils, but it does happen in a lot of large organisations. It's harder to see non-performers. But there's also lower productivity because the wages go up. You've got managers managing bigger budgets and more staff. They demand, quite rightfully, bigger salaries. Now, unless they're an awful lot better than usually exactly the same people who are getting the smaller salaries prior to the organisation getting bigger, they're not going to be producing enough extra work to keep the same level of productivity on a dollar basis. As I said, the reports are longer. In smaller organisations, the reports tend to state facts more. And finally, yes, you can get bigger grants and bigger organisations, but there's a thing called the flypaper effect, well known to local government economists. Basically, the idea is the money sticks where it hits. The more money local governments get, they tend to spend more than what they actually receive. So that has implications for financial sustainability. So they're the main for and against size and financial sustainability arguments. So theory is important. It's actually the most important thing because it gives you predictive capacity. It allows you to predict what will happen in the future. But in order for you to reasonably rely on theory, what you need to have done is shown that it's been able to predict events in the past using past empirical data, using econometrics, which is my stock in trade. So here in front of you see the table from the paper. And what we're looking at is the association between local government size, number of assessments, but we also ran regressions with population size, got basically the same answer, and a composite measure of financial sustainability, which was really robust to any specification changes. And I'll go through in the paper why the measure we were using PCA, was such a good technique. Now, I've done this for whole state, urban and rural councils in New South Wales over a long panel of data, as you can see. The key things, that top line, they all have 3 stars. What does that mean? It means it's highly statistically significant. It means that there's absolute statistical certainty that these are true results that you can rely on. And what are the results? They're negative numbers, which means as councils get larger, their financial sustainability gets smaller or reduces. This is entirely consistent with recent work that I've published and discussed in videos where we show that growth is not helping councils in terms of financial sustainability at all. It's not a surprise to anyone like me who deals in theory and did a rigorous examination of theory and knows the literature, particularly literature about economies of scale. I've written a lot of it, that this result would come to pass. It will be a surprise to most people in local government land and most of our local government regulators and ministers, but they won't be watching this video or reading the paper anyway, so they'll probably never know, which is why we keep doing what we do in Australia, sadly. It always puzzles me why anyone believes in the bigger is more financially sustainable myth without examining it. You've only got to think and reflect on the fact that we have the biggest councils in the world in terms of local government area size, and some of the biggest councils in the world in terms of population size, certainly in the top quartile, and yet we have a financial sustainability crisis for local government in Australia. Clearly, and we keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and things keep getting worse and worse and worse. Clearly, size isn't helping financial sustainability, and if any of our decision makers bother to watch this video or read the paper carefully, they'll find out the full reasons for that effect. I'm enjoying busting these myths. It's amazing how many of them topple down and how quickly they topple down the minute you look at them is quite remarkable. And I have a long list, and as I say, if I survive long enough, I'll go working through that list. But no one wants to fund local government research, and none of the decision makers want to read it. So sometimes I wonder what I'm doing anyway. Yes, I'm a little bit jaded. Okay, but if you can get people to subscribe to this channel and watch the videos, particularly local government ministers and GMs and things like that, maybe we can make a difference. It's the hope I live for. Anyway, the implications of this, that we now know that smaller councils are more sustainable. So what does this mean? It confirms our earlier work looking at growth and unit revenues. It refutes most of your amalgamation arguments. They're just wrong. They're factually wrong and theoretically wrong. It refutes the New South Wales Boundaries Commission that keeps saying, oh, you can't de-amalgamate, small councils can't possibly be sustainable. Opinions and thought bubbles just don't stand up to proper, robust, rigorous evidence based on thorough knowledge of theory, the literature, and econometrics. Sorry, guys in the Boundaries Commission, need to put some work into this. It suggests that regulatory attention, which is mostly focused on the small councils, is misplaced. The ones you should be worrying about are the big councils, not only because they're the least sustainable, not only because they're usually the least efficient, but also when big councils fall over, like the Central Coast, it affects the whole sector a lot more, because what state governments have been doing, they're not supposed to do it, but they've been doing backdoor bailouts by putting up the Commonwealth grants allocations for these councils that get themselves in a mess. Now, when big councils topple over, they get this extra grant money, which helps work them out the messes. It's got very little to do with the administrators. It's got more to do with these backdoor bailouts. But that means there's less money for everyone else, including the smaller councils, including rural councils that rely on this money very heavily. So big councils falling over is a risk to the whole sector. And that's where our focus needs to be, on the bigger councils, because they pose such a large risk for everyone. There's also a very good reason to stop amalgamating councils, because you're making a bigger and bigger problem. All you're doing is kicking the can down the road. But when that can takes off, explodes, implodes, whatever you want to say, it's going to be a really big mess when these big councils start toppling over. If you merge two struggling small councils into a bigger struggling council, you just get a bigger mess. It confirms that these small councils, typically rural councils, are special. What I found in other work, and I'll be proving it shortly in future work, is that they tend to be more efficient, they tend to be more sustainable. They don't have the level of governance and bureaucracy that some of the bigger councils have, and I think sometimes state governments want that, but in terms of effectiveness, they're much more effective also. So it's interesting, isn't it? So, shock horror, another well-established myth in local government has been busted. And hopefully I'll get to bust lots more before my time is up. Look, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. We're getting close to that 500, but there's 500 odd councils in the country, and there's lots of local government ministers and you know, all the people in these parliamentary inquiries that aren't watching these videos. Try to do me a favour, send these links around to them, try to get them to watch, you know, can they devote 10 minutes of their lives to watching these videos and learning things so that they don't keep making mistakes? I don't know. Let's find out if you help me. All I want to do is help local government. I want strong, vibrant, sustainable communities just like you. That's all I'm angling for. Help me to help others, and thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.